The massive biker standing beside Pump 7 didn't move when the woman approached him, but his hand stopped halfway to his wallet. She was thin, trembling, with a purple bruise spreading across her left cheekbone that makeup had tried and failed to hide. Her voice barely rose above the highway wind when she spoke. "My husband hits me, but I have nowhere to go." 6 words that would turn a routine fuel stop into something that made the local sheriff rethink everything he thought he knew about justice. And by the time the sun rose the next morning, a quiet gas station outside Cedar Ridge, Wyoming would become the starting point of a story nobody in that mountain town would ever forget. 18 hours earlier, Marcus Steele Harmon had left Cheyenne heading north, riding alone on a route he'd traveled 100 times before. The October air bit cold through his leather, and the aspen leaves along Highway 287 had turned the hillsides gold. He was 6 feet 4 inches, broad-shouldered, with a beard gone gray at the edges and hands scarred from decades of motorcycle work and harder living. The Iron Reaper's patch on his back marked him as a lifer, and most people who saw him coming decided to look somewhere else. He didn't mind. 53 years old, and he learned that being feared was easier than being understood. The gas station appeared just past mile marker 34, a lonely outpost with 2 pumps, a flickering open sign, and a parking lot that needed repaving 10 years ago. Steele pulled in around sunset, his Harley rumbling to a stop beside the diesel pump. He stretched, feeling the day's ride in his lower back, and started fueling while a cold wind carried the smell of pine and distant snow. That's when he noticed the car. A faded blue sedan parked near the air pump, windows up, engine off. A woman sat in the driver's seat staring straight ahead, not moving, not checking her phone, just sitting. Steele had been around long enough to recognize when something wasn't right, and the way she gripped the steering wheel with both hands sent a quiet alarm through his instincts. He finished pumping, paid inside with a nod to the teenage clerk, who looked nervous the moment Steele walked through the door, then returned to his bike. The sedan was still there. The woman hadn't moved. Steele was tightening his saddlebag strap when he heard footsteps on gravel. She appeared beside him so quietly he almost didn't notice until she spoke. Her voice raw and unsteady like she'd been rehearsing the words for hours, but they still came out broken. "Excuse me." Steele turned slowly. Up close, the bruise looked worse. Her right eye was bloodshot, and there were finger-shaped marks on her wrist that she tried to hide by pulling her sleeve down. She was maybe 35, pretty in a way that exhaustion had worn thin, and she looked at him with the kind of desperation that made grown men look away. "My husband hits me," she said again, louder now, forcing the words out. "But I have nowhere to go." Steele didn't answer immediately. He studied her face, then glanced toward the sedan. A child's car seat sat in the back, empty. "You got kids?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "2. They're with my sister in town. He doesn't know where." "Where's your husband now?" "Home. Drinking." Her voice cracked. "He called 20 minutes ago. Said if I don't come back tonight, he'll make sure I never see my kids again. He's got a lawyer. He's got money. He'll take them." Steele exhaled slowly through his nose. He'd heard variations of this story before, seen women trapped between violence and impossible choices, and every time it made something hard and furious settle in his chest. "What's your name?" he asked. "Claire." "Claire, why'd you come to me?" She looked down at her hands. "Because you look like someone who isn't afraid of him." Steele almost smiled at that, but the situation wasn't funny. "You call the cops?" "Twice. They came, talked to him, left. He's careful. Never does it where anyone can see. Never leaves marks that last long enough to photograph." Her voice turned bitter. "And he's friends with half the department." Steele turned that over in his mind. Small town. Powerful man. Broken system. The same equation that let monsters hide in plain sight. "You got a plan?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "I thought maybe I did, but I don't. I just can't go back there tonight. I can't." Steele looked past her toward the mountains where the last light was fading behind the peaks. Then he looked back at her, at the bruise, at the fear she was barely holding together. "You hungry?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "There's a diner 10 miles up. You're gonna follow me there, and we're gonna sit down and figure this out." He reached into his vest and pulled out his phone. "And then I'm gonna make some calls." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have money to pay you. Didn't ask for any. Why would you help me?" Steele swung his leg over the Harley and kicked the engine to life. The rumble filled the cold air like distant thunder. Because nobody should be that scared at a gas station, he said. Then he rolled forward, and after a long moment, Claire walked back to her sedan and followed. The diner smelled like frying onions and burnt coffee, and the waitress barely glanced up when Steele walked in with Claire behind him. They took a booth in the back, away from the windows, and Steele ordered coffee for both of them without asking what she wanted. Claire sat with her arms crossed tight, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. "He doesn't know you're here," Steele said calmly. "He always knows." Steele shook his head. "Not this time." The waitress brought the coffee, and Steele waited until Claire wrapped her hands around the mug before he spoke again. "Tell me about him." Claire hesitated. Then the words came slowly at first, then faster. Her husband's name was David Brennan. He owned a construction company that did most of the commercial work in Cedar Ridge. He sat on the town council. He donated to the sheriff's re-election campaign. And behind closed doors, he was a man who used his fists when his wife didn't obey fast enough. "It started small," Claire said quietly, "grabbing my arm too hard, shoving me during arguments. Then one night he hit me, and I told him I'd leave. He laughed, said I couldn't survive without him, said no one would believe me. Was he right? About people believing me?" Claire's laugh was hollow. "The first time I called the police, the deputy who showed up went to high school with David. They talked in the driveway for 10 minutes. Then the deputy told me maybe I should try not provoking him." Steele's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "And your family?" "My parents are gone. My sister tries, but she's got her own problems. And David made sure I don't have friends anymore. Every time I got close to someone, he'd start a fight, accuse me of things, make it so humiliating I'd stop seeing them." She stared into her coffee. "He isolated me. Then he made sure I couldn't leave." Steele leaned back, processing. "Classic pattern. Classic trap. Your kids," he said. "How old?" 6 and 4. "He ever touched them?" "No, not yet." Her voice broke. "But I see the way he looks at my son when he cries. Like he's a problem that needs fixing." Steele nodded slowly. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. The voice that answered was rough, familiar. "Steele, you better not be in jail." "Not yet, Grizz. Need a favor." Marcus Grizz Callahan was the president of the Iron Reapers Northern Chapter, a man Steele had ridden with for 20 years. If Steele was intimidating, Grizz was a natural disaster. And more importantly, he had connections that ran deep. Steele explained the situation in short, clipped sentences. When he finished, there was a pause on the line. "This Brennan guy," Grizz said slowly. "He the one who built that new county building?" "Sounds right." "Yeah, I know him. Smug bastard." Another pause. "How dirty you want this handled?" "Clean," Steele said firmly. "But permanent." "Copy that. Give me 2 hours." Steele ended the call and looked at Claire. "You're not going back tonight." "I told you he'll do nothing," Steele interrupted. "Because by morning, he's going to have bigger problems than you." Claire stared at him. "What are you going to do?" "Get you somewhere safe first. Then make sure your husband understands he doesn't own you." She shook her head. "You don't know him. He won't stop." Steele leaned forward, his voice low and hard. "Claire, I've been riding with the Reapers for 30 years. I've seen men like your husband before. They're tough when they're hitting someone who can't hit back. But they fold fast when someone bigger shows up. What if he calls the police?" "Let him." Steele's expression didn't change. "I'm not breaking any laws. Just having a conversation." An hour later, Claire was sitting in a women's shelter 2 towns over, the kind of place David Brennan didn't know existed and wouldn't find without help. Steele had called ahead, explained the situation, and personally walked her inside while the shelter director promised 24-hour security. Claire grabbed his arm before he left. "Thank you." Steele nodded once. "Stay here. Don't call him. Don't answer if he calls you. Understand?" She nodded. Outside, Steele climbed back on his Harley and rode into the night. His phone buzzed as he hit the highway. "Grizz, got what you need. Address is 4120 Ridgeline Drive." "And Steele, looks like our friend Brennan's got some interesting business partners. Might want to bring backup." Steele smiled grimly and sent a single message to the Reapers group chat, Cedar Ridge. "Tonight, bring everyone." By the time he reached Ridgeline Drive, 8 motorcycles were already parked along the dark street, their engines idling low. Grizz stood beside his bike, arms crossed, and nodded when Steele pulled up. "House is lit up," Grizz said. "He's home." Steele looked toward the large 2-story house sitting behind a manicured lawn. Lights blazed in every window. Then let's go have that conversation. David Brennan answered the door holding a glass of whiskey, his face flushed with alcohol and irritation. He was tall, well-dressed, the kind of man used to being in control. But when he saw the wall of leather-clad bikers standing on his porch, his expression faltered. "Can I help you?" he said slowly, trying to sound authoritative. Steele stepped forward. "We need to talk about your wife." David's eyes narrowed. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave my property. Not until we're done talking." David's hand tightened around his glass. "Claire sent you? That's rich. Where is she?" "Somewhere you'll never touch her again," Steele said evenly. David laughed, but there was an edge to it now. "You think you're scaring me? I know people. I'll have the sheriff here in 5 minutes." Grizz spoke from behind Steele, his voice like gravel. "Go ahead. Call him." David pulled out his phone, but his hand shook slightly as he dialed. The call connected, and David's voice turned sharp. "Sheriff, I've got a group of bikers on my property threatening me. He stopped. Listened. His face went pale. "What do you mean you can't?" David's voice rose. "I donate to your goddamn campaign." Whatever the sheriff said next made David lower the phone slowly. He stared at Steele with something new in his eyes. Fear. Steele smiled coldly. "Turns out your friends aren't as loyal as you thought." David's jaw worked. "What do you want?" "Divorce papers. Signed. Full custody to Claire. No contest." "You're insane." "I have rights." "You lost your rights when you put your hands on her," Steele interrupted. "And here's the thing, David. While you were busy playing big man around town, we did some digging. Turns out your construction company's been cutting corners. Bribed inspectors. Forged safety reports. One of those buildings you rushed through? The county building? It's got structural problems that could collapse in a strong wind." David's face went white. "You can't prove that." Grizz held up a manila envelope. "Actually, we can. Got copies of everything. Emails. Bank transfers. Photos of the shoddy work. All ready to go to the state attorney general unless you cooperate." David's hand trembled so hard, he set the whiskey glass down. "If that goes public, I'm finished." "Then I guess you better make the right choice," Steele said. For a long moment, David just stood there, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. Finally, his shoulders sagged. "What do I have to do?" Steele pulled out a folded document. "Sign this. It's a preliminary agreement. Claire gets the kids, the house, and half your assets. You get to walk away with your freedom and your business intact. But if you ever contact her again, if you even drive past where she's living, all that evidence goes public. Understand?" David took the paper with shaking hands. He didn't read it. Just signed. Steele took it back, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his vest. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "One more thing, David. If I ever hear you touched another woman, if I hear your name connected to anything like this again, I won't come to your door for a conversation. I'll come for you. And you won't see me coming." David nodded jerkily, sweat beading on his forehead. Steele turned and walked down the porch steps. The other bikers followed, engines roaring to life one by one until the quiet street was filled with thunder. 3 weeks later, Steele returned to Cedar Ridge and met Claire at a coffee shop downtown. She looked different, stronger. The bruises had faded, and something in her eyes had changed. "The papers went through," she said quietly. "He didn't fight it." Steele nodded. "Good. I got the house, the kids, everything." She paused. "How did you do it?" "Doesn't matter." Claire reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "It matters to me." Steele looked down at their hands, then back at her face. "Sometimes people need someone to stand between them and the world. That's all I did. You gave me my life back." Steele pulled his hand away gently and stood. "You did that yourself. You walked up to a stranger at a gas station and asked for help. That took more courage than anything I did." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling now. "Thank you, Steele." He nodded once, then walked toward the door. Outside, his Harley waited in the sunlight, chrome gleaming. He kicked the engine to life, and the familiar rumble settled something in his chest. As he pulled onto the highway heading north, Steele thought about the woman who had whispered 6 desperate words to a stranger and found the courage to escape. And he thought about how sometimes the most feared man in the room could become the answer to a prayer nobody thought would be heard. The mountains rose ahead, and Steele twisted the throttle, disappearing into the curve of the road where the aspen leaves still burned gold against the sky.